Welcome to another edition of Big Business Blueprint live interviews, where we speak with one business leader and understand their personal and startup growth playbook, fundraising lessons, products and services they offer, and how they think about their market expansion, customer acquisition, retention, attracting talent, and building a tight knit workforce, and so on. I'm Bhuva Shakti, based in New York, and the founder of WalletMax. We are a global community of startups, investors, executives focused on increasing sustainable funding access, especially in climate tech, fintech, deep tech, and AI sectors. If you're a fintech startup, don't miss out on Wallet Max's pitch competition and investor panel event coming up April 20th in New York City as we kick off the New York FinTech Week in 26. Please submit your interest at getwalletmax.com. And the tickets are now live. You can see the Luma registration link scrolling below here. Join us to connect with startups, investors, executives, industry leaders, and then feel free to pitch your startup as well. Now, coming back to today's session, in this Startup Growth Playbook interview, I typically invite a startup founder or a co founder, and we interview them about their growth lessons. But more importantly, what differentiates them from the crowd? How do they prioritize impact along with profits and planet? We deep dive into their personal, professional, and startup journeys and their mission to uplift. Today, we are speaking with Tiya Gordon, co founder and CEO at It's Electric. Tiya holds 20 years' experience in design, leadership, and operations across a range of disciplines for some of the country's top firms and institutions. She's now venturing to spend the next 20 years building companies that use design to wage war against the climate crisis. Tia's startup, It's Electric, solves the biggest barriers cities face in the deployment of public EV charging. Her career's work has received the industry's top accolades, including the National Design Award from the Cooper Hewitt, the 2023 Next Big Thing in Tech, and she is a 2024 finalist for the Earthshot Innovation Challenge. Let me now hand over to Tia and invite her to say a few words about her background and career path. Over to you, Tia.
Thank you so much. So yeah, you pretty much encapsulated it. So I'm a lifelong New Yorker whose background isn't in what necessarily a traditional founder in my space comes from. So I worked and lived in the world of design here in New York City for over 20 years, building really big projects, but more specifically, they were projects that all encompassed how to implement technology into physical space and into public space. So you can go in a time machine into a time before you had any kind of smartphone in your pocket. I was one of the first groups that was putting together the designers and the technologists to figure out sort of these large multi-surface touch walls and how those can work in a physical space. That went on to graduate me to a variety of different projects and public works, culminating in the biggest project that I worked on, which was the public-facing technology for the 9/11 Memorial and Museum at the World Trade Center. That was a labor of love for almost 8 years, from concept through execution. And people don't realize it, but there's about 200 layers of technology there, from the memorial pools above grade to the museum below. And I really wanted to take all of the knowledge I had in terms of hardware and software integration and physical space and user experience and design principles and map that into climate. I believe that, especially now in 2026, I have to get used to saying 2026,
Yeah.
there's very few regular folks that are not already sort of climate minded that can be influenced to make choices because of climate factors. But you can make something easier or cooler or better. And if that also happens to be a benefit for the climate, then it's a win-win. So that's the strategy that we've been implementing at It's Electric, and the one that we continue to carry through in all of our work.
Yeah, not many people connect design to innovation or entrepreneurship or fundraising. They are like, okay, let's build a product, get the service sorted out, fundraise, grow, and expand. But it's really a unique experience where you bring a lot of design expertise into entrepreneurship. And I believe that's your unique secret sauce. So, what do you think was the pivotal moment in your life that wanted you to solve the climate crisis?
Oh, I don't think there was a specific pivotal moment. And, what's alarming is the language now that we're not focusing on solutions, but we're focusing on adaptation. And I don't think
Correct.
that we need to take that path at this point. I think that it's still well within reason. If we could just look at the very small case study of when we were all living through the pandemic and people were working from home, and you saw effectively the smog just eliminate from the skies above Los Angeles in a matter of a couple of months. So we have the capability to move towards zero emissions. We have the technology. And it's just a question of having the intent and for the will of the people and the will of the government to move us there. So for me, on that same note, the pivotal moment or the anchor that moved me was definitely living through the COVID-19 crisis here in New York City. There's an amazing book called The Devil Never Sleeps, which came out about a year and a half or 2 years into the pandemic by Juliet Kayyem. And the book was not necessarily about the pandemic, but Juliet Kayyem was Obama's, she worked in disaster management in the Obama White House. And in the book, she had this phrase which really, really affected me. She said, there's this concept called left of the boom in disaster management. And she said that you can either be left of the boom and you can work to prevent something, or you have to live right of the boom and you have to live and mitigate it. And so my whole thesis turned into what can we do right now left of the boom to prevent the next crisis, given that it was devastating to live through COVID here in New York City to see the implication it had on industry and family and life.
Yeah, I relate to it a lot. Even during the climate week in September 25, we saw a lot of mitigation and adaptation equally being focused on. But also, climate crisis is not just a climate crisis. When you don't see that polluted air above LA for 2 months, you can see people's well-being was better. No air pollution, better water, better quality of food, and everything. So it's very much connected to people well-being, is my belief as well. So really resonating there. Now, when you focus on climate crisis at its electric, where do you see opportunities and challenges specific to market expansion? You can speak to it either within the US perspective or comparing it to the rest of the world.
Sure. So at It's Electric, what we do is we are laser focused on solving how to scale electric infrastructure in densely populated cities, specifically infrastructure to charge electric vehicles. So what we do, that's our novel approach, is we've basically coined this thing called building power, where we use the
Yeah,
spare capacity in buildings to power public infrastructure as opposed to a direct utility connection. So we circumvent or we avoid or we take a loophole around having to do direct utility connections, which helps accelerate timelines and reduce costs for the building of infrastructure. So your question was around market growth and where the opportunity is. And for us, it's massive because what's also happened in terms of a shift in the last year, not only in terms of um, prevention versus mitigation, or sorry, prevention versus adaptation. But there's also obviously what is now becoming an energy crisis,
yeah,
where
mhm,
rising costs of energy are going to be what drives a lot of solutions. It's going to be the kitchen table and it's going to be people's wallets. So we know that if we can find a very clear way for people to be able to quote unquote fuel their vehicle at a third of what their neighbor is paying,
mhm,
then that person's going to want to do the same thing.
yeah,
Again, it's not about doing the right thing. It's about, wow, they're paying, $2,400 in gas a year and I'm paying around 900 in electricity. I think that's going to be the game changer.
yeah, totally resonating with that because there are buildings everywhere, residential and commercial. If there is spare capacity, why not leverage it and save some money on the way, right? And there is a lot of discussion in the New York tri-state area as well, with the electricity bills going up for regular people like us. But then there is an indirect impact due to data centers and all the AI processing that's going on, which is Totally not my problem. But why my electric bills are so high? So
Yeah.
why can't we just make it more efficient instead of talking about climate and clean energy? So really affecting a lot of day-to-day people. But you also see there is a contrast in the current political landscape, not only in US, globally also. So many things are happening, and even the big corporations, private investors, who used to focus on a lot of impact initiatives, are trying to shift priorities. Uh, I mean, they started last year, more so this year. It's very evident. So, based on your extensive experience in both design and operations, why do you think innovating in mission aligned projects is important today and for the long term, especially at It's Electric? When you go to fundraise, do you get questions around balancing profits and return on investment?
It's a good question. Um, you know, I sometimes like to have a retrospective look on what my perception was of a quote unquote climate tech investor versus what has been, in some cases, the reality, and in some cases, not, to be fair. But when I started It's Electric, we're about, in founder years, we're about 3.5 years. Sorry, we're biologically about 3.5 years old, or founders years, times seven, whatever that is. It's like dog years. And what I assumed was that climate tech investors really were excited about backing a solution that could have a strong impact on climate, less so than looking for a 10x return, that they would, be wanting to basically back something that they saw that would be a huge market change, and they would be willing to come in to support that, of course, then getting an inevitable return, but on the longer timeline that climate tech requires. It's not a 2-year return, it's that 10-year return. And I was not involved in sort of climate tech 1.0. That was before I became a founder. And what I had to do is I had to live with the negative consequences of investors not seeing the returns that they wanted from that first tranche of deployments into climate tech. But
Mhm.
now, again, when Trump took office, the message boards were all saying, don't say climate, say energy resilience, energy dominance. Those were the keywords that you were supposed to say. But I do think that the shift has happened without that messaging prompt, purely from, like we said 2 minutes ago, the surge of demand on energy, and find and the ways to be able to meet that immediately, and not on a project that's going to take 10 years to develop. And that's where I think the sweet spot is for those that are looking to work in this space or invest in this space or operate in this space, is to try and find the solutions that are shovel ready now, and not ones that require, basically applications that have, 5 to 7 year permitting timelines.
Yeah, exactly. Because the need is now, in 5 years, who knows what else may come? Like quantum will be there, and then there'll be more challenges in energy. We don't know that. Uh, like you said, in your current and past roles as an industry leader, of course, there is political landscape, there is economy and global challenges, disruptions, but specific to US regulations or even cross-border or global regulations, have you faced any challenges? How do you navigate that? So you may have a very unique product, better go to market, and an excellent solution that can provide return on investment. But there could be barriers in terms of regulations. And while also there could be challenges outside regulations in terms of protecting people's privacy, security, accessibility, inclusion. There are so many things beyond your core product and service. So, how do you navigate some of that?
Um, it's an appropriate question for this era. And, one of the things that we always did was, there's a lot of companies that were winning either contracts or grants through Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. And some of these grants were sizable, some of them were smaller, and people were kind of scrapping them together to build up larger footprints. And It's Electric was the recipient of several fantastic awards and grants through the Biden era, through the Biden administration, of which I will note we worked diligently on to win. It's not easy to win a large
Mhm.
government grant. These were not by any means handouts. These were highly competitive and year-long procurements. So when we did win them, having the foresight that an election was coming up and that we knew it was going to be tight, a strategy was that I never relied on that funding, and
Mhm.
I never kept it in our core cash flow. I treat it as this would be nice if it comes in, but it's not something that we built the foundation of the business on. And this is paid off in spades because most investors are not interested in businesses that require government subsidies in order for their unit economics to work. So
Correct.
we
Yeah.
had to, and while that was, potential quote unquote harm to us when we had that funding frozen, because it's still literally frozen. It could unfreeze over the course of the next 2 years, but that's a waiting game, and we're not waiting on that. What was interesting is that it also impacted the cities that were looking to benefit from the technologies these grants would provide.
Yeah.
So when the cities lost their funding, then It's Electric, whose model has always been economically that we're free to cities, became really interesting and really appealing. We really wanted to develop, even during the Biden administration, before Trump was in office, a solution that was free to cities, because we saw that it's really hard for cities to prioritize 15 or 30 or 45 million capex outlay for capital costs for climate solutions. So we felt that if we could create a model that was truly free to them, and in exchange, we, the company, keep the revenue and not the city, but the city still gets the infrastructure, then it would be a win-win. So that's exactly what we did. And, following the last now 12 months, honestly, we've never been busier.
And that's really good news. So when you're busier, there is demand. Like giving it free, building the infrastructure, keeping the revenue is a great model. And also, when there is more public demand, the cities are going to reach out to you versus you trying to canvas for them. And it's really a good scenario where it's not just you not getting the grant yet, but the cities are also struggling. So it's a good win-win partnership in terms of connecting the dots. Now, with a lot of success that you've had, I just want to maybe zone in on a couple of them. If you have any examples of customers or companies where you have uh, personally seen success in a large scale. But also, I want to talk to you about a mistake that you made, be it in its electric or prior to that, and how did you navigate? Are there any valuable lessons? The reason for asking this is, as entrepreneurs, typically everyone is always aiming for success, but you've had success and failures. So how did you navigate that, and how do you keep moving?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that in many ways, I think the best founder is someone that comes from a background where they have to, by default, wear all of the hats.
Mm-hmm.
And the failure is when you learn that there's a hat that you're supposed to wear that you didn't even know existed. So for me, we're always learning. So I can span a lot of different roles as a founder in a relatively small team. But when you have to learn a new skill that then becomes really critical to the success of your company, the specific example that I'm thinking about is, I can do a lot of different things, but I won't fake what I don't know how to do. So, for example, we had to learn a lot about growth marketing once we started to really deploy in all of these different geographies. And that's an entirely special subset of skills where people really have tremendous professional experience and knowledge to know what works and what doesn't work. And it trickles all the way down, it trickles across the spectrum from the right messaging and the right campaign to the right ad buys and the right amount of spend that you're spending in different markets. And the lesson that I learned, and I don't want to call it a failure, but is that you have to do it to understand it. And
Mm.
there's no way of saying this is there's no way of saying that we're going to go into a period of marketing and growth in the company and try and hang on, let me think about how I want to articulate this. You really need to just put things out quickly. And I know the founder expression is fail fast, but
Yeah.
it's not failing fast. It's learning really quickly what's working, what's not working, evaluating, and then moving all of your cards into the pile that's working better. And again, this is where I say don't fake it till you make it when you really need someone that's a specialist in that area. The 20 hours that I would spend trying to figure out this one thing, I can hire someone who has that expertise as a consultant and that can, quote unquote, teach me how to fish and can kind of come in and really help and do that one specific leg of the work so that it's done. And then I can stay focused on the things that are more important. So it's the balance that you have to strike as a founder between wanting to consistently stay really scrappy and really cost efficient, but not doing it at the detriment of the work that you need to get done, getting done in a timely way. And that can be painful. So that can mean putting out something that you feel is imperfect. Like you know, I'm infamously known for just being a perfectionist, and it's very painful for me to put out something into the world that everyone sees, that thousands of people see, that isn't
Yeah.
perfect. And I don't think
No,
you'll ever know what those are if you look at my products or if you look at our ads or if you look at any of that, but I see it right away. And I won't say what they are, but it's just something that I will live with, but no one else will see but me.
yeah, that's the story of every founder, investor, corporate executive, industry leader, everyone, right? You may know what you could have done better, but the people on the other side may see, oh, it's already a very good product or service that they can rely on. And growth marketing is a great example. I've tried it also. It's a different thing. Like there was a different wave during social media times, and during the pandemic, it became totally different. And today, we don't know if growth marketing really exists because AI has taken over a lot of things. So there is so much changing in that. So things like that, definitely trying to delegate, and you as the founder and co-founder focus on core operations of growth and funding, fundraising, or bringing in revenue and customers would be a good
Mhm.
lesson for other founders, I think. But in
Yeah.
terms of someone trying to get into entrepreneurship as a founder or co-founder, trying to think about it, but they don't have all the connections, they don't have the right network, they're not part of the so-called insiders club where you have the connections, right? So what advice would you share for someone trying to get into entrepreneurship like you, let's say as a founder, co-founder, or similar?
Yeah, no, I literally did not know a single investor when we started as Electric. As most founders do, our first round was a very small friends and family round. And people said to me, oh, well, I'm sure you just know tons of investors and high net worth individuals. Just give them a call. And, I had to just think that through and build that network. And
Yeah.
now, I mean, of all the things that I've looked back on, is that I thought I had a large network before starting It's Electric, but it uh, is minuscule in compared to the amount of people and the spaces across which I now am able to have a conversation, send an email, help someone else out. This spans, my network across obviously tech and government and transportation and energy and venture and accelerators. has grown exponentially. And the way that we started, and I will say that just with warning, we did start with an accelerator. We started with a great accelerator. It was called Generator. We were the
Mhm.
first climate tech accelerator for Generator, and they were fantastic. I've heard other stories from other people that they've had very bad experiences with accelerators. So I think that you have to kind of really pick and choose what you do. But they literally, especially if you're a first time founder, if you can find a pre seed accelerator, that's really going to take you from step 0 to step 10. It's invaluable.
Yeah, I've also heard about generator. I think early years there was a different type of model, and then later on the model was slightly different, and there were some challenges. But they've had good success stories in the early years.
Yeah,
Now, when
hi-
you're
highly recommend Generator. Just to be absolutely clear, we had a fantastic experience with them, and we are still literally in touch with everyone there all the time. They were our first champions, and they were in many ways our first check.
Yeah, no, definitely. But today's founders or co-founders think that the minute you enter an accelerator in 12 weeks or 3 to 6 months, you're going to get a check, you're going to exit, you're going to grow, expand. Is getting a check the only thing where you want to enter into an accelerator? What are some tips for emerging pre-seed or seed stage startup leaders to get on the fundraising path beyond just, okay, just the check being the only outcome of a accelerator or any other initiative they pursue?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, money is critical. Um, I would say that for emerging pre-seed founders or early stage founders, it's obviously about making sure that you have the funding, but also making sure that you have not just clear milestones, but important ones. So obviously, it's going to be different if you're B2C or B2B, or doing something that's much bigger in terms of gov tech or hardware or combinations of all three of those models. But I would build out, basically strategy boards where you're looking at basically, four corners where it's finance, it's partnerships, it's benefits that you're bringing to others. I mean, that's a huge one that you want to think about when you're
Hmm.
structuring how you're going to get your first customers. Again, like I can't speak to, sort of, direct to consumer. That's not our forte. But when you're building something that's for a larger customer, such as a city or a municipality, you need to start building those relationships well before your product may even be ready.
Hmm.
You
Yeah.
need to do a lot of listening to understand what it is that they're looking for and to see where your product and their needs have that meeting point. We did a lot of early discovery. It was, some people called it like kissing frogs, where you're just literally talking to, we would talk to the sustainability team in the city of Boston. And then later that day, we talked to the sustainability team in Arkansas and in Las Vegas and in Alabama and in Jersey City. And you really want to understand, like, if your solution, whatever that solution is something that city would be interested in. And just building out the time to have those conversations is a muscle and an exercise that you need to have well trained. You don't want to waste their time. You want to make sure that you are making that you're having a productive conversation that is giving you the information that you need, but also is helping them, if indeed your product, your solution can be a benefit to that city, to kind of set the groundwork for how you could then take that next step and work with them to pilot that technology. And in a lot of cases, I'll kind of fill out like sort of the fourth corner of obviously like funding, network, partnerships. But past that, it's access. So
Hmm.
you may have what you think is a dovetail solution for a client, but there's someone there's a missing middle that's going to help you get there. So for example, for us, when we wanted to do our very first pilot using spare capacity in buildings, it's not very easy to reach out to the Department of Buildings in New York City and say, hi, we're a 2-person startup. Can, we use, non-certified hardware and connect it to your building and test this out. Is that going to be okay? Cool. That's not going to go very far. So we needed to find that middle layer that would help validate the reason for why we wanted to do this. And so we found that in New York City Economic Development Corporation. We knew that this EDC had lots of sort of underutilized assets of buildings in the city. And we knew that they were interested in climate solutions. And so we put 2 and 2 together and we said, hey, let us do a pilot on your stranded assets. Let's get the insurance clear. Let's get the rules of engagement clear. And let's also outline what can be the best possible outcome for this. And for them, what it turned into is that we ended up being what is now lovingly known as Pilot Zero for EDC's Climate Innovation Pilot Program. So now every single climate tech company that wants to pilot with EDC is based on the predicate of our first pilot that we did with them. And it really just took the initiative of us reaching out to EDC, us kind of building the framework with them for them to see that, hey, this is something that we can do, and we can kind of help be that, quasi-governmental bridge between private startups and public cities, and to help put that connection in place. So it's really trying to understand, like, who's that going to be that middle layer to help you make those connections. At the same time, I'd also say, you also really want to be looking at what is your dream list of large partnerships, and to start to build out who are the people that you want to start talking to at those corporations or those nonprofits or anything in between, because those are all long tail. There's no world in which you can pick up a phone and have a signed partnership in weeks,
Yeah.
Unless it's a very small thing that's not going to move a needle. So, if you're going to imagine that any partnership that's worth its salt is going to take you 9 to 12 months to pen, that means you have to start today.
Yeah, active listening is a key skill that a lot of us are losing it after the pandemic, like I would like to say. But your feedback need not always come from your customers, right? So investors could also be people who can articulate what they are looking for. So actively listening for who needs what from early on, any type of stakeholder before that check comes into your bank account is really important. Not trying to see, okay, who can write me the first check? Let me form a transactional relationship with them, because I've also seen in the startup venture capital ecosystem, it's all about relationships. You may talk to someone, build a relationship today, maybe down the line, there is a business opportunity. But if you are going in with a business first, opportunity first approach, then there is no win-win or mutual collaboration or engagement for the long term. So that's a valuable lesson that a lot of founders really need to also take in. Now, this is for founders or co founders who may be in the early stages or mid career stages of their life. What about experienced professionals, people who have seen everything, they are at the executive level in a corporation? Is it possible for them to connect and be part of the entrepreneurial ecosystem, be it investor facing or internal roles? So you said you have a small team. So how do you bring in people into your team? Is it more early mid-career or executives or a wide variety depending on the needs? But then also you have to watch out for the operational expenses and the overhead that may come with it, right? And so how do you balance?
It's a really good question. We like to joke at Fledrick that we only hire Brooklyn moms. It seems to have panned out to fall in that direction. It's not true. It's not all Brooklyn moms, but it's a lot of Brooklyn moms, because moms get it done. And
Yeah,
so
definitely. Very efficient.
very efficient, excellent time management, multitask.
Yeah.
So, funny enough, now we're very specific with the roles that we hire. But when we first started, we actually didn't write a very specific job description. We wrote a very broad job description. And we put it out there to see which types of candidates were interested in us. Now, don't forget, like, when you're an early stage startup, like having someone, sorry, just like put yourself in the mindset of being in like year one of starting a company. And I'm not talking about a company that's on the cover of Fast Company and Inc. and in Newsweek in the first 3 months. There's always going to be like those outliers, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for the thousands and thousands and thousands of other companies, imagine that you start your company, you get some traction, you get some validation, and now you have to hire someone. Obviously, you always want to work from your network and hire from strong relationships where you can get referrals and understand where that world clicks in. But it's pretty, it's kind of magical the first time that you get a total stranger that applies to work
Yeah.
at a startup. It really is like I mean we have a lot of other things that we have to think about these days, but I will always kind of remember how remarkable I found that the very first time someone wrote a letter to It's Electric out of the blue asking if we were hiring. And this was like, early days when we were like maybe 4 to 6 months in. So going back to your question and my answer, so the first roles that we hired, we just wanted to find an exceptional professional that has a specific sort of funnel of skill sets and then build a job to their strengths, as opposed to saying, here's the JD, here's the exact things that we need you to perform on. And that's how we found our very first director of public affairs and our very first director of planning. So we knew we wanted someone on the gov side, and we knew we wanted someone on the planning side, but we didn't want to be really prescriptive. So we knew it was about finding the right person and then having them kind of help us understand how they can grow the company from their lens of expertise. Because I don't have a government relations background. I'm not an urban planner. And so I need to find someone who can take all of the knowledge that they have, and these are employees that have tremendous knowledge and tremendous intelligence, and say, here's how my skill set maps to your company. And that's how we made those early hires.
Yeah, so definitely there is room for executives, late stage, early career, mid career, as long as you know exactly what you're looking for and for how long. So
Yeah,
similar to the growth marketing consultant that you mentioned earlier as well, right?
I
Being
think,
very targeted and prescriptive. Mhm.
yeah, it wasn't sort of like the oh gosh, what is that show? Silicon Valley, where it's just all undergrads. I think that would
Mhm.
be quite chaotic.
Yeah, I mean, in some scenarios, certain industries might not have existed or evolved before some of the undergrads were even born, right? So you need to tap into that talent as well. So that's really great to know. And how can another startup access the right people for fundraising? I mean, what is your fundraising story like? Have there been challenges, lessons? Are there things that someone else can learn from?
Oh, I mean that I think that's a skill set that you're always building. I don't think you ever master it. Um,
Hmm.
and it's like you said, it's building a relationship on a foundation of a shared understanding. So obviously you want to just make sure you're not going to a SaaS or fintech investor with your transportation or mobility product.
Hmm. Yeah.
That is a lot of work that you have to do. There's amazing lists that are out there that have just like, thousands of rows of different VCs across the United States, and they're sortable, and you can find these online. And,
Mhm.
there's on a billion sort of founder slacks, but you really want to take your time and go through those. You want to then take the next step of just like building your funnel of, finding obviously the right stage, the right vertical, cross cross referencing their existing portfolio company to make sure there aren't conflicts, or also
Mhm.
looking at their portfolio company to seeing if there's sort of if they are interested in the similar types of things in terms of what you're doing, but for a different space. So this can be very broad in terms of hardware, or this can be very narrow in terms of solutions for cities. And you really kind of want to build that funnel. And then I think you really want to kind of get a sense of, not only is that VC obviously active, that's another side of the coin that you have to constantly be aware of. VCs, of course, are always raising their own funds.
Yeah,
And so often they may not be actually deploying capital. So it's really, people say that fundraising is a full-time job, and I fully agree that even when you're closing a round, you're never not fundraising. You're always
yeah,
building new relationships and trying to match the stage of when you want to go back to someone with the right milestone. So even though you don't want to kind of have those conversations when you're at a bar, you do want to kind of know, where do I have to be to catch your interest? Like, what would be the thing that I could do that would make me a very desirable or, interesting company for your portfolio. And when you have that knowledge, you want to be able to promote that back to that VC in a way that is not disingenuous or salesy, but is genuinely like, hey, I just want to let you know, we just hit this metric. This just happened. We're not fundraising right now. We'll probably go back out in 3 months, and just kind of always have that cadence with folks. I still haven't found the magic formula, for the best way to do this, because God knows everyone's inboxes, especially now after the holidays, is, they're
yeah,
thick and they're deep, and so you don't want to just coat people with emails. You don't want to send things that are email blasts that go out to your entire investor newsletter. But you do want to find a nice cadence to kind of keep everyone aware, keep that sort of pulse, that they can kind of keep a sense and a track of what you're doing. And then, know who actually cares and who doesn't. Don't just send a newsletter through your email. Use a service, a MailChimp, any of those other sort of services. So you can see your open rates, you can see who's clicking on what, you can see what's interesting. And you can get a very quick sense of who's actually reading what you're writing versus people that are just deleting your email as soon as you send it. And so it can help you really kind of get in and be very strategic, to know who's going to be open to a follow-up. And so you're not just spending a lot of time trying to chase a cold link or a cold
yeah.
network.
Just because there is a list out there, don't keep blasting emails, right? So take the time to do the diligence of who exactly is your match. But sometimes, if they are a match, they may not be actively deploying capital, like you mentioned, and that has nothing to do with your startup or your solution. But maybe they are helpful in other ways where they can introduce a partner or a customer to you. So trying to keep the relationship warm is really essential in this ecosystem, especially almost like everyone knows everyone. We all come across each other in many events and programs that happen. So it's really important to keep the connection warm and also, like you mentioned, genuinely interesting, being transparent and building the trust first before asking for something, right? So I know we are kind of coming close to our conversation. I wanted to ask you a little bit about what are some emerging trends that you are excited about in your industry or generally in the industry.
Definitely. So within, electric transportation, I'm very excited about all of the smaller, lightweight EVs that are coming out. So companies such as Slate and Tello, these are
Hmm.
very affordable, very stylish electric vehicles that, again, affordability is going to be what moves the needle. And
Correct.
so
Yeah.
I'm very excited to see how that can impact adoption here in the United States. I'm also excited to watch how these companies are sort of working a similar playbook to what we're doing, and they're just selling a genuinely better product, a product that you cannot get that's gas powered. Um,
Hmm.
Not related to transportation, but I also greatly admire, for example, Copper, which is an electric range company. Also, gorgeous product. Nothing out there compares to it, and it has a battery sort of trickle system, so that you always have the power that's needed. And again, it's how these companies are using design and sort of desirability to lead, and climate is almost this something that's in the back. That's the afterthought. So those are the types of
Yeah.
companies that I'm very excited about, and that I see a very bright future ahead, and that we want to run in that same herd.
So really innovative companies in the space. But I also hear quite a lot when I talk to people, okay, there is innovation, there is a lot of innovation, but is it really usable for people? Do we have enough storage? Do we have lightweight, efficient storage? Is there mobility concerns? So are we able to scale? So how do you balance keep innovating while it's not being useful? Or where do you strike the balance where you innovate but still be useful for broad set of people? So then you can scale. Because I always see this storage conversation whenever there is an energy conversation these days.
Yeah, 100%. So, our core proposition is that it's electric, puts very easy to install public curbside EV chargers in cities of every typology. So, we've deployed in Boston, in Detroit, in San Francisco, in LA, and Alameda. We're launching our next two cities in Q1. And we're meeting that very basic need. We've done that first innovation, which is highly accessible, ubiquitous public charging that's easy to use and that's fun to use. And then we sit there for a minute and we build that and we grow. And it's this land and expand opportunity for us where we get into the cities, we build a really good base of excitement, we build strong loyalty from our customers, and we start to expand. But in the background, we have a large grant that we received from the California Energy Commission to make these same chargers in their same very small, smart, very sleek profile to make these
Mhm.
bidirectional so
Yeah.
that
Mhm.
when the vehicle's battery when the driver opts to do so, the driver can opt to push energy back into the grid and to be paid to do so by the utility. So this is a very clear example. There's blackouts and brownouts all the time. So they can be very simple where you would get a text on your phone that says, hey, if you push 20% of your battery back into the grid, Con Ed, PG&E, whoever will pay you this much money per kilowatt hour, and you push it back in. And so, we want to really think about, obviously, the innovation now, service that now, grow that
Mhm.
base so that then when we have more functionality, it's just a new feature that's available through energy. Energy in many ways is going to be a currency of the next several decades, and it's something that we need to think about it in those terms. So we think about as a car's battery is effectively a very large wallet for energy that's movable. And
Yeah.
so the more you kind of shift your mindset out of a gas station to vehicle tank mentality, and you think about energy as a fluid commodity, the brighter the future can often be.
And I've seen this in the solar space also. When you talk to residents, hey, install solar panel, your electric bills could be 50% lower. You can only convince them so much. But when you say, hey, if you produce more, you can sell it to your neighbors and make extra money from that, then
Mm-hmm.
they are really motivated. But it also helps the energy transformation because your neighbor may or may not have solar or they may not have it sufficiently. So it kind of serves the dual purpose. Definitely agreed where not trying to not innovate, but rather does the innovation today help people today in the right way? Then there is more adoption, right?
Exactly.
Now, how about competitors? So, what are the areas you differentiate yourself? Because I know I've heard a lot, and also I know you quite well as well. So, how about competitors? So, it's electric. Who are your competitors, and how do you try to stay up to date?
Yeah, I mean, we very much stand alone in our field. I know that a lot of startups like to say that, but we're the only curbside charging company startup that's actually deployed on curbs in the United States. What differentiates us is our process of building power. What differentiates us is our very unique design what differentiates us are the fact that we have a detachable cable. There's a whole design and functionality reason for that. Our competitors that we're really going up against are those that are legacy, those are that are incumbents that we need to take down, or we need to partner with to help them innovate to the future. So we know, we call all of these incumbents, we call them, Gen 1 of curbside charging, where they're just doing things as things had always been written. New infrastructure gets connected through direct utility connection, end of story. The fact that, we're using this circumnavigation to building power is brand new. So, for the first, we're again around 3.5 years old, and for the first 2 years, we were constantly kind of looking over our shoulders, thinking that someone's going to come up with a copycat. And a lot of investors ask that very same question. And the answer now is that if someone tomorrow, if I open my inbox and there's a company that is literally copying exactly what we're doing, that's flattering, but they're not going to have access to the cities that we do, because the cities aren't going to start a whole new procurement process and go through another RFP. And even if they do that, we have a head start of several years on any competitors. So our moat is the fact that we are already in these key cities, and that we are, again, building customer loyalty there and then scaling. So the competition is not something that is the thing that keeps us up at night. It's something that we kind of embrace that challenge, because we've built so many different differentiations against every other product out there.
Yeah, people think about winning customers, but more importantly, retaining customers for the long term, right? That's really important.
If you're the only charger in a 2-mile radius of that customer, if you're literally the only charger, then you have a very sticky opportunity in front of you.
Correct. Yeah, no, definitely. And trying to think about that and positioning your solution is more important than trying to fight the competition and spending energy there. You have good presence or building up presence in the US. Do you have ideas to expand beyond US
Yeah,
market? Is
we're
it in the horizon?
definitely. We get a lot of inbound, funny enough, from Australia and Switzerland, but that's a little bit too far afield right now. We know that Latin America and Canada are two very open markets right now for this technology.
Hmm. Yeah.
But there's certainly worlds in which we can focus on all at once. For right now, we're really continuing to just build in North America, and then we can go from there.
Thanks for sharing, Tia. I know I can ask you a lot of questions, but we are kind of at time at the moment. I
Yeah,
want to invite you to share anything else before we wrap up that you want to tell
sure.
our audience.
Absolutely. Just quick plug for the company. So if you go to our website, it's electric.us. And if you are a driver and you're in one of our cities that we're active, you can sign up and we can send you a detachable cable so you can charge in your neighborhood. We're always looking to expand. So even though we have about 50 chargers live right now in the United States, obviously we're going to be in the thousands over the next few years. So as we build, we want more drivers. And we also want more buildings to work with. So we're always looking for buildings and for drivers to sign up, because we use that data to understand where we should put chargers next.
And people can reach out to you on your LinkedIn, on your website.
Yes, LinkedIn is best, absolutely. But if you're a driver or a property owner, go to our website. We have a form you can fill out. But if you have questions for me, LinkedIn is absolutely the best way to reach me.
And I'm sure we'll cross each other in one of those events in 2026. So again, Happy New Year and
Happy.
hope to see you soon.
Likewise, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Tia. And thanks everyone for joining. Again, April 20th, we have a pitch competition and investor panel event for New York FinTech Week. Feel free to check out our website and join us. Thank you.